Hey everyone, I'm Rebecca Jarvis, ABC's Chief Business, Technology, and Economics Correspondent, and I want to welcome you today to what is sure to be a really interesting CEO panel. I also just want to thank all of you in the audience right now. I know you are fighting the good fight, making it count against foreign adversaries and others on a daily basis, and I appreciate what you're doing to keep all of us safe and secure. But to our CEO panel today, for FelCon 2020, we have a distinguished group of guests, beginning with George Kurtz. He's the president, CEO, and co-founder of CrowdStrike. Eric Yuan, the CEO and founder of Zoom, and Stuart Butterfield, CEO and co-founder of Slack. It's great to have all of you with us today. And I think such a timely conversation in this moment where we are all learning to work from anywhere. And here we are connecting with each other in the way that we really only can connect with each other in these days and times over Zoom. So I love that it's very meta that we're going to be having a conversation about all of these things and doing all of it over Zoom as well. To that end, I want to start with you, Eric, because if anyone has defined work from anywhere and made it ubiquitous, it is Zoom. It is your company, the company that you've built. You've been a pioneer in this space. And I wonder, in your mind, what the biggest change has been since March over these last handful of months for you and your business.
Yeah, Rebecca, thank you. First of all, we feel it is our great honor to help the world, to help the people stay connected. I think the biggest change is about the scalability. We never thought about that, from just serving for enterprise customers all the way to like all the consumers, like a K-12 schools, all kinds of consumer use cases, right? That is something new, and also that's a big surprise.
A big surprise, and as somebody who covers news from a very large perch where I see teachers using it and students using it and people who had never even heard the word Zoom before this pandemic set in, how have you been sort of adapting to that whole new world, and how do you think differently about business as a result of trying to reach such a broad assortment of people?
Yeah, I think first of all, we got to stay focused on our company, the culture and value. Our company culture is always to deliver happiness. We got to think about everything from an end user perspective. What we can do more, and also differently to keep delivering happiness to those customers, not only for traditional enterprise customers, also all the consumers, as you mentioned, K-12 schools, and also our company culture is tied to the company value, which is to care, meaning care about the community, customer, company, teammates, as well as ourselves. So it is the best time for every company, Zoom, CrowdStrike, and Slack, to care about the community, to show our corporate social responsibility. This is a great time, for us to leverage our technology, keep working as hard as we can, to help the world.
Stuart, Slack was created very much in that same mentality that Eric just talked about there, the idea of creating culture, helping communities, connecting to each other in disparate locations. How have you seen these last 10 months shape your company?
I think we're still in the process of shaping it. There was obviously an initial reaction in the early days when everyone started working from home, and a lot of adrenaline and a big surge of usage and things like that. But when we start to actually dig into the policy side and think about if we're going to hire people remotely, we're not going to be able to tell them to move in the future, which means that the company's actually going to have a different shape, and what our office is for and how we're going to make the most of them. It turns out to be like almost a monumental set of changes. And in those changes, I think we're really pushing for opportunities to make fundamental improvements, not just to find the digital equivalent of something that we used to do in physical space, but to try to find ways to do different things. And do things differently, take advantage of the latest technologies to change the way that we approach problems and solve them in a different way. Benedict Evans, an investor, has one of my favorite ways of thinking about this, which is a long time ago, we had typewriters and carbon copy forms for expenses. And the first version of digitization of that was to take the same form and put it in Microsoft Word. And then later on, we took that same form and put it into a Windows app. And then we took the same form and put it into a web app. And eventually someone realized you could just take a picture of the receipt. And that was like a completely different way to approach the problem. So we're really looking for those. I know that all of our customers are looking for those because in the time where there's a lot of change, we get to critically reevaluate the way that we've done everything and look for opportunities to up-level.
When you think about that office of the future, how frequently do you see people going and why are they going to that office?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. We've done a lot of research on what was happening in the pre-pandemic world. So some of this is a little bit of a guess. We did recently publish some research from a new organization we started called Future Forum that 12% of employees, not just at Slack, but of thousands of employees, want to or expect to return to the office 5 days a week, kind of just as they did before. The overwhelming majority of people want some flexibility, and there's different reasons for that. You might want to move a little bit further away and get a house where you can only get an apartment in the city. You'll get more space for your family or something like that, but not be willing to commute for 2 hours 5 days a week. Commuting for 2 hours 2 days a week maybe isn't as much of a sacrifice. So there's things like that, but we think about unbundling the office, all the different purposes that it serves. And it's a cultural touchstone, and it's a place to host customers, and it's like a projection of power, having a logo on the side of the building. It's all of these different things. And some of the most important are the conversations that happen between a handful of people that have breakthrough potential to solve a problem, or the brainstorming that happens in a conference room. Sometimes the particularly moving all hands or other events. The thing that's least valuable or least important to do in an office is the thing that takes the most square footage, which is housing people who are kind of just sitting by themselves using their computers and not talking to anyone. So if you take that part out, what's the office for? It's for people to come together, to plan, to brainstorm, to kind of align around how they're going to approach a problem. And when they just have a lot of work to do, to generate a big list out of that, they can be in the office, they can be at home, they can be in a co-working space, they can be wherever. And that flexibility, I think, will create not just better lifestyle choices for employees, but because it will force us to create a lot more discipline around communication, I think ultimately be a big improvement to the way we run our companies and to what we can produce.
Well, and speaking to what it will force us to do, Stuart, George, I wonder from your standpoint, it also forces companies to think about security in new ways in this work from anywhere mentality. And I wonder what you're seeing from those who are doing it the best right now and how companies are thinking through that challenge of making a secure workplace when the workplace is no longer a physical space.
Well, I think if we look at the pandemic, obviously it's a pretty interesting time and it's really impactful in our lives, but I'm always looking to find the lemonade out of lemons. And I think when we look back, we will see a real acceleration in technology and digital transformation. And hopefully that's a good thing that actually comes out of it. And with that sort of acceleration will be security transformation. So as people think about going to the cloud, as they think about using all of these cloud-based technologies, they're going to have security wrapped around it. And as we were helping customers get operational, as they basically took their networks and turned them inside out, and they had 1,000 people outside, and suddenly they had 100,000 people outside their corporate network using Zoom and Slack. All those technologies needed to be secured. So I think it's really just understanding that a security transformation has to happen as much as a digital transformation. And that's just on the technology side. I think Stuart brings up a lot of really good points on how people are going to work, how they're going to interact. I don't have a crystal ball, but I do know it's not going to be what we were doing in the past. And I think it'll be more around work-life integration and, different levels of balance and being able to go in the office a few days, but having the flexibility to Zoom in. And I think ultimately we'll probably get a much better and more productive work environment if we, use this as a productive time for change. And I think that's, what we're focused on. And I think my co-panelists are focused on that as well in their own companies.
George, have you sensed at all a shift between sort of the more short-term, near-term thinking of March and maybe April and even May to this point where here we are and this is a longer-term, not only conversation, but decision-making process?
I think that's absolutely true. I think the first wave of this, the fog of war, it was all about let's get operational. Let's just make sure that companies can actually operate. And certainly make sure they can do that in a safe fashion for their employees. Now, I think everyone would probably agree this is more of a sustained campaign, right? You just have to hunker down and figure out, how to live through it. And ultimately, we know, like everything in history, we'll get through it, but we just got to figure out the right ways to do it. And we're starting to do that, maybe going out to dinner once where we weren't doing that 6 months ago, and going into the office. And I know we're spending a lot of time on the protocols of how to get people together and how to think about this. But I think it's longer term thinking, not only for employees and the office environment, but longer term thinking about the technology stacks that are in use. And what we're seeing is that, similar to what Stuart mentioned, this first wave of, hey, we're going to take something and just move it to the cloud, which is similar to the expense issue, right? We're just going to put it in Word. People are thinking a few steps ahead and saying, okay, why should we just take a legacy architecture and just stick it in the cloud when we can actually modernize the entire stack and go cloud direct with a lot of these SaaS software offerings that are out there. So hopefully we'll get a good benefit out of it in the future.
Well, and I think one thing you're also getting at is this idea of going from purely surviving to actually thriving in this new environment. And I look at Zoom and CrowdStrike partnering around the NFL draft, and just the idea that now that this is our reality, it's time to kind of make this reality better for people.
I think that's right. It's a bit of time of war. I mean, people, in the initial shock, you got to get through it, but then you just have to continue living and figure out ways to get better and make things work. And, we know we'll get through it. And for us, working with companies like Zoom on the NFL draft, and you have to have a draft, right? You had to do it somehow. And I think everyone would agree Zoom has changed the world in terms of what we've done over the last 6 months. I mean, we couldn't operate without it. I know CrowdStrike couldn't operate without it. So the fact that they were involved in the NFL draft, I think, is really cool. The fact that we were there to help secure it is really cool as well. And, we'll look back on this time and be able to tell our grandkids, we remember when.
But you don't know, your grandkids might be watching the NFL draft on Zoom secured by CrowdStrike. I mean, you're not that old, so maybe like 40, 50 years from now.
Well, that would be a great thing. We're here for long haul.
Eric, George really gets at the fact that Zoom has become ubiquitous. Zoom is basically Kleenex now. As Kleenex is to tissues, Zoom is to how we communicate and integrate with each other and have meetings in this era. What changes have you had to make? What things have you had to address in this moment to make this successful?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say we got to understand, what kinds of problem we are facing. We really should understand that. Take, the NFL draft, for example, right? And we have a great, team from George and CrowdStrike, and not only from technology side, but also in the product, and his team help us, right? And we have, their technology, plays a big role to safeguard our user data, and also backend infrastructure is more like the bodyguard, right? So first of all, when we understand the problem, we need to take actions quickly. Who is your partner? Who can help you, right? That's number one. Number two, we got to look at our own product, make sure it's very scalable, right? What if tomorrow there might have another 5 times more usage? Can you survive or not? We got to proactively look into the risk factors. Last but not least, we also got to make sure all the employees really understand what's going on, stay focused, and communicate well, keep everything open and transparent. It's more like how to balance between the offense and the defense. You understand the problem, You are very reactive, to fix those issues, and also you got to look in the long term what you can do differently, and to satisfy the new demand.
Absolutely. There's both the internal and the external of figuring out how to navigate this new picture. Stuart, on your end, have there been any challenges, and if so, how have you guys thought through that in this moment?
I got stuck thinking about the challenges. I think no challenges that weren't kind of part of the normal course of business. Other than, I think, challenges that are more at the individual level than the company level, although ultimately those ladder up to the company. And that's, the impact of this, the current situation is very unevenly distributed. So if you're brand new to the workforce, out of college, and the office played a big role in your social life, and you have a very small apartment in the city, you're going to experience it in a very different way than someone who has children who are high school age or grown, and you live somewhere where you had a long commute. Maybe this is a pretty good situation for you. For single parents, it's pretty close to impossible. A lot of people are at their wits' end, let's say, and so ultimately, while those are individual challenges, the challenge for the company is how to support and take care of the employees who are struggling or suffering. Still operate the business and deliver to customers, and still feel like you're doing right by the employees who are able to work. That one, that's going to work itself out to some degree over time. It's totally unoriginal to point this out, but this is not like distributed work or working from home as traditionally practiced by companies like GitLab or Automatic, who makes WordPress in the before time. Because back then you could walk out the door and sit in a coffee shop and watch people go by for a little while you made some notes on work you had to do, or you could go get a massage or a manicure or get your hair cut, all that kind of stuff. And living without the normal amenities of life and living in an environment where people have a lot of anxiety is pretty different. A smarter CEO than me, John Donahoe, who's now the CEO of Nike, once said to me, the job of a leader when times are good is to inject stress into the system, and the job of a leader when times are bad is to absorb stress and take it out of the system. And to a certain extent, it's a little bit of a different mode, I think, probably for many companies like ours, because it's been good times, growing quickly, successful startup, all that stuff. So my job has switched from injecting stress into the system to trying to pull it out or absorb it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. When, in the wake of the George Floyd killing, you sent a very impassioned note to your employees, speaking of stress and influences. And as efforts in both tech companies and around the country have been made in corporate America to be more inclusive and to put diversity in a very real and serious way at the top of their priorities, I wonder what your thoughts are in terms of what technology can be doing and doing more of to help lead that charge.
Yeah, so I'll answer it in two ways, because I'm not sure if you meant like how the tech industry, how those companies treat their employees, or what kind of applications of technology can help. But I think the technology companies are much more resilient in this kind of economic environment. They've been growing much more quickly. They have many more resources. So I think it's up to us, all three of us on this call, and many other leaders to figure out how to take those resources and use them to most effectively support those initiatives or reach those goals. And then on the other side, the use of technology, I think there's still a long way to go in terms of understanding the impact of hiring and compensation decisions, promotions, kind of people analytics broadly. And people analytics is now a common phrase, but I think it's 7 years old or 8 years old or something like that. So relatively new kind of discipline, if you will. We're still, to a certain degree, learning about ourselves. Those technologies are important, but they're not especially sophisticated or difficult. So I think they'll be really widely shared and available to leaders at companies in every industry.
George, how are you thinking about this? Where do you see the opportunities in the tech space to make greater equality, to make diversity and inclusion a more integral part of the model?
I think in general, tech companies, everyone involved needs to do a better job. I mean, I start out with that. And I think doing a better job and getting to the ultimate goal of having a diverse and inclusive workforce kind of starts at the top of the funnel. You have to have a diverse candidate pool. And a big part of what we focused on at CrowdStrike, we have a separate foundation, which is nonprofit, CrowdStrike Foundation. And we've been very active in the college scholarship process, and in particular with certain organization charities like Black Girls Code. So as we think about very arcane sort of areas like Linux kernel engineering, there's just a very small pool out there. So I think it's incumbent on us, and what we can do at CrowdStrike and others in the community is to allow greater opportunities for people to get involved in these technologies and provide them with things that they need, whether it's tools like laptops or whether it's just opportunity to meet and be exposed to what can be done. I think part of it is if you don't have the exposure or you're not in an environment where you understand what can be done in a technology company, and it could be marketing, it could be sales, it could be product development. I mean, there's so many things, but if you're not exposed to that, you really don't know. So another big element for CrowdStrike has been on the internship. We've got just a massive pool of interns. Even during the pandemic, we've been able to have virtual interns, which is crazy. It's a really hard thing to do, but we've been able to do that, and we've expanded our base into very diverse schools. So for us, we try to focus on how to expand the pool, get the best candidates for CrowdStrike, get diverse candidates. I think ultimately we'll be a stronger company for that.
It's such a good point about developing talent and helping people come on board and then making sure that they're staying on board with support, especially in a moment like this. How have you, with that virtual hiring of virtual interns like you've done, how have you nurtured and nourished those relationships?
Well, we try to focus on a mentorship type program. You can't just throw interns, into a Zoom meeting and call it good, right? You really have to make sure that you're mentoring them, even if it's virtually. You can't go down to the coffee shop. So how do you continue to interact with them? And what we found, and this is a feedback, I've gotten, dozens of emails, I would say, from interns just as they left. And they've said, hey, we thought we would, be at CrowdStrike and doing some, reasonable things, but kind of intern things. But they were really thrown into some projects that had real impact. And, that was kind of a surprise for them that we would, say, hey, you need to figure this thing out. You're smart. And we took that data and, it wasn't just busy work, it was impactful. And I think that went over really well with the team.
Yeah, in some ways, having virtual interns, you have to be even more thoughtful about what you're asking of them and thinking ahead about their assignments, because you're not just passing them in the hallway and saying, make a photocopy for me.
Exactly right. So you have to have, projects that they can work on, they understand. You're not there to be over the shoulder, so they can't ask you necessarily 10 questions an hour. So you really have to think about what it is they're going to do, what the impact is. Some of it has more impact than others, but ultimately, if you can set them up for success and force the communication, we found that to be the best.
Eric, you have hundreds of millions of daily users on your platform right now. What is Zoom doing to send a message of acceptance, of tolerance, of equality and community to your user base right now?
Yeah, so that's a daily meeting participant, not a user. So first of all, and we got to take a step back, try to understand what's going on. Right, it's very important. That step one is about learning and about what's going on, and that's why not only did I talk with many other CEO friends like George and Stu, we also hired our chief diversity officer and also talk with our employees, invited guest speaker. It's more like a learning session, right? That's a step one. And step two, we got to leverage, our technology, and also like we partner with Cleveland University in terms of sponsorship of the scholarship and also the internship program as well, right? And also partner with some other organizations, right, to take some actions. That's very important. And last but not least is also to measure, no matter what you do and how you can measure the success, right? We got to keep an eye on that and every day think about that and measure that, either leverage our technology to talk with others, learn from each other, or we have internal metrics, right? Make sure we are making a very good progress.
And when you think about that progress and what comes next, what are the new rules of the road? What is your vision of the future for Zoom in the next couple of years?
I think on business front, for sure, I think we truly believe a video is the new voice. And video conferencing, video communication is going to become mainstream. I think that will stay. Unfortunately, I think technology is not ready yet, right? And today, even if we're on a Zoom call, there's no social interaction. We got to think about how to innovate and the next step to drive innovation. Because our vision is we truly believe video conferencing like Zoom can even deliver a much better experience than face-to-face meeting. We are not there yet, but we will get there.
So give us a little hint of what that might look like. How am I going to get a little more heartbeat through this conversation on Zoom a year from now?
So I'm not sure about 1 year later, but actually let's say 5 or 10 years. Imagine a world where 4 of us on the Zoom call, and guess what? I shake hands with you and give stood and draw a bigger hug. They will feel my intimacy. And if you speak even different language with AI, we also can support a real-time language translation. I mean, George, when he is, getting a cup of coffee, I can enjoy the smell remotely as well, right? That's a world where we are going to live in the future, not to mention 3D and AR technology. I think that will completely change the way for us to live, learn, and play.
A scratch and sniff Zoom. I really like that. I want to smell the coffee brewing on the other side. Stuart, if I walked into a virtual Slack conference room right now, what would be on the whiteboard for your future?
Oh, that's a good question. Slack Connect, which allows people to communicate across organizational boundaries, so with vendors or customers, partners, is something that's really taking off and accelerating over the last 3 or 4 months. And there's a huge roadmap for that. But the ultimate promise in the context here, I guess, is an improvement in collaboration, an improvement in communication, an improvement in user experience on the one hand, and an improvement in security and compliance. And very often, unfortunately, those two kind of trade off against one another. There's improvements for security that make for a worse user experience, and the user experience goals that people have that result in either less compliant or less secure software or environments. And that's a message that has resonated very well with enterprise customers in particular, because we're taking communication that either happened in environments where there was no verification, so you have suffer from spam and phishing attacks and things like that, but much more frequently taking communication that happened out of band. So the customer doesn't have their DLP or message retention policies, it can't do legal holds, no e-discovery tools, no encryption key management that the company holds. And the prospect of being able to have that access and control, to be able to hit their compliance needs, to be able to increase the level of security across the organization while improving the means they have to collaborate with customers or partners is pretty huge. So that's one big one. And then I guess very quickly, more broadly, continuing to look at ways to take processes that today must be synchronous. So we must be doing something at the same time and make them asynchronous to create more flexibility in people's schedules and structures to allow us to work remotely without kind of being locked into the same schedule all the time.
Well, and that also speaks to your earlier comments about, for example, being a single parent working from home in a situation with a child, and just the acknowledgement that if you are going to create an environment for a lot of people to be successful in that environment, that flexibility combined with talent is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then Eric is a close friend, and I'm a happy customer of Zoom and a very frequent user, but I'm sure even he would like to maybe reduce by 10% the amount of the day that we're on video conferences, so we can get all the joy and pleasure we get from Zoom without having a little bit too much. It's like a little bit too much delicious food.
Yes.
Right on. 30%.
I was just going to say, you don't enjoy cake as much when you eat it all the time.
There you go. Perfect.
George, last question to you on this front. When you think about the future, change is this new constant. Within CrowdStrike and beyond, what are the new tenets of this world going forward that are necessary for security and for technology to be successful in this new normal?
Well, I think you have to start with the technologies, whether it's Zoom or Slack, are amazing. We use them all as well as millions of people, but you're not going to be able to operate and use any of these key technologies without security. So we may not have all the sexy stuff that people see in terms of Zoom and enjoy Slack every day, but we're quietly behind the scenes and making sure that everybody can enrich their lives using technologies like these. So for us, we know as people continue to digitize their lives in the world in front of us, that we will play a valuable role. And if you think about 5G, if you think about the proliferation of IoT devices, if you think about all these cloud workloads, CrowdStrike is capable of securing all of those. And we look at it as anything with network, compute, and storage is an opportunity for CrowdStrike to protect that device. And whether that's a device that connects to a process control system, or whether it's your laptop, or whether it's something that runs in AWS, we want to be there to secure it. So we see a massive opportunity for CrowdStrike and to really be that universal agent to protect all of these different workloads and endpoints and devices that are out there in whatever shape and form. It could even be on a wristwatch in the future. We want CrowdStrike to be silently behind the scenes, making sure that people's digital lives are safe and secure.
Thank you so much to all of you, George, Eric, and Stuart. Great conversation. Thanks so much to everyone for joining us for this Falcon CEO Roundtable conversation, a really interesting one. And best wishes to everyone out there who continues to work hard and fight the good fight. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.